Marcus Webb spent 20 years cooking for soldiers in desert mess halls. Now retired, he ran a soup kitchen from a rundown warehouse on Bleecker Street, serving anyone who walked through those dented metal doors. 65 people showed up every single day, rain, snow, or blazing heat. The neighborhood thugs called them angels as a joke. But when those same thugs tried to shut Marcus down, they discovered why that nickname was more accurate than they ever imagined. What happened next turned a forgotten street corner into the most protected block in the entire city. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The warehouse on Bleecker Street hadn't seen a coat of paint in 30 years. Rust bled through the corrugated metal siding, and the loading dock sagged like a broken promise. But every morning at 6, Marcus Webb unlocked the side entrance and fired up the industrial stoves he'd salvaged from a condemned VA hospital. He'd learned to cook in the Army, Fort Benning, then 3 tours overseas, feeding hungry soldiers who filed through his mess tent with sand in their boots and exhaustion in their eyes. Marcus could stretch a budget further than anyone believed possible. He knew 17 ways to make beans interesting and could turn donated vegetables most people would throw away into something that actually tasted like hope. After his discharge, Marcus took his pension and disappeared. No family waited for him back home. His parents were gone, and the woman he'd planned to marry had moved on during his second deployment. So he drifted through Philadelphia for a few months, working odd jobs, sleeping in cheap hotels, wondering what a man did when the only thing he'd ever been good at was feeding people who had nowhere else to go. That's when he found the warehouse. The owner had died, and the property sat in probate limbo. Marcus made a deal with the estate lawyer. He'd pay minimal rent and handle basic maintenance in exchange for using the space. 3 months later, he had the health permits, a dozen folding tables, and a hand-painted sign outside that read, "Open kitchen, everyone welcome." The first week, 11 people showed up. By the end of the first month, 43. By winter, Marcus was serving 65 meals every single day, and that number never wavered. Same 65 people like clockwork. There was Dorothy, a 72-year-old woman who'd lost her apartment when her building was condemned. She always sat in the corner near the window, reading paperback mysteries she borrowed from the library. Raymond used to be a construction foreman until a back injury and prescription painkillers destroyed everything he'd built. He helped Marcus wash dishes now, moving slowly but with dignity. There was Tommy, barely 20, who'd aged out of foster care with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and a distrust of anyone who claimed they wanted to help. They came from different disasters, but they all ended up at the same metal tables, eating Marcus's navy bean soup and cornbread, drinking coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Marcus never asked questions, never required them to prove they deserved to eat. The door was open, the food was hot, and that was the deal. Bleecker Street sat in a part of the city that progress had forgotten. The factories had closed in the 80s, the shops followed in the 90s, and now the whole area was just empty storefronts with soap-painted windows and buildings slowly collapsing into themselves. The only businesses still operating were a check-cashing place with bulletproof glass, a liquor store that stayed open until 2 in the morning, and a pawn shop that bought anything and asked nothing. 3 blocks south, the city had started gentrifying. Coffee shops with exposed brick and $16 sandwiches. Apartments that rented for triple what they'd cost 5 years ago. Young professionals who jogged through the streets in expensive sneakers, carefully avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked like they might ask for change. That dividing line created tension, and tension created opportunity for people who knew how to exploit it. The Bleecker Street boys weren't really boys anymore. Most of them were pushing 30, but they'd controlled these 6 blocks since they were teenagers, and they weren't about to let go. They ran protection rackets on the few remaining businesses, sold drugs from 3 different corners, and made sure everyone understood that nothing happened on Bleecker Street without their permission. Their leader was a man named Dante Riggs. He'd grown up 2 blocks from the warehouse, dropped out of school at 15, and built a reputation for being smart enough to avoid unnecessary violence, but vicious enough that nobody tested him twice. Dante wore expensive watches and drove a BMW he parked in front of the check-cashing place like a throne. For the first 8 months, Dante ignored Marcus's soup kitchen. It wasn't making money, wasn't attracting attention, wasn't causing problems. Just another sad charity operation that would probably fold when winter came and the heating bills got too high. But then the developers started circling closer. A real estate company out of New York bought 4 buildings on the next block. Demolition permits were filed. Construction fences went up. And suddenly Bleecker Street wasn't forgotten anymore. It was undervalued and ripe for investment. Dante saw the change coming. He'd been waiting for it, actually. When property values went up, protection payments went up. When new businesses moved in, they paid tribute just like the old ones. The soup kitchen sat on a prime corner lot. That warehouse could be luxury condos. That's when Marcus Webb stopped being invisible and started being a problem. It was a Thursday afternoon when Dante walked through the soup kitchen doors for the first time. Lunch service had just ended. Dorothy was still finishing her coffee. Raymond was scrubbing pots in the back. Marcus was wiping down tables with a rag that had seen better days. Dante stood in the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior. 2 of his crew flanked him. Leon, who was built like a truck and had the personality to match, and Jamal, younger and meaner, always looking for an excuse to prove himself. Marcus glanced up, read the situation immediately, and kept wiping tables. The kitchen's closed until tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. if you're hungry. Dante smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm not here for food, old man. I'm here to talk about business. I don't do business. I serve meals. Everything's business. Dante walked further into the room, his expensive sneakers squeaking on the concrete floor. See, this whole street is my responsibility. I make sure things run smoothly. Make sure people stay safe. That kind of service costs money. Marcus stopped wiping and straightened up. He was 58 years old. Grey stubble on his jaw, permanent squint lines from too many years in the sun. He didn't look intimidating. He looked tired. But something in his posture made Dante's crew shift their weight slightly. I don't have money, Marcus said simply. I barely keep the lights on. Everything that comes in goes right back out as food. Then maybe you should close down. This property's valuable. Someone's going to buy it eventually. Might as well happen sooner rather than later. Can't do that. People need to eat. Dante's smile faded. You're not understanding me. I'm giving you friendly advice. Take it, or things get unfriendly real fast. Dorothy stood up from her corner table, her chair scraping loud in the silence. Raymond appeared from the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel. Tommy moved toward the door but stayed inside, watching. One by one, others who'd been lingering after lunch gathered closer. Not threatening, just present. 65 faces, quiet and patient. Dante looked around, suddenly aware he was outnumbered. But these were homeless people, addicts, broken-down veterans, and discarded human beings that society had already given up on. What were they going to do? 2 weeks, Dante said, backing toward the door. You've got 2 weeks to figure out how you're going to pay, or we figure it out for you. He left, Leon and Jamal following. The door slammed shut. Marcus went back to wiping tables. Everybody okay? Dorothy sat back down with her mystery novel. Raymond returned to the dishes. Tommy finally left, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. The soup kitchen settled back into its normal afternoon quiet, but something had changed. Everyone felt it. The angels had been threatened. And angels, Marcus had learned during 20 years in the army, didn't always need protection. Sometimes they were the protection. The next morning, Marcus arrived at 5:30 instead of 6. He couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Dante's face, the way those 2 thugs had positioned themselves by the exits, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. He'd seen that kind of territorial posturing overseas, different uniforms, same game. He started the coffee first, then pulled out the ingredients for breakfast. Oatmeal with cinnamon and raisins. Toast from Day-Old Bread, the bakery 3 miles away, donated twice a week. Scrambled eggs from a wholesale supplier who gave him the cracked ones nobody else would buy. By 6:15, the line had formed outside. Dorothy was always first, carrying her canvas bag with the library books. Then came Martin, a former accountant who'd had a mental breakdown after his daughter died and never quite found his way back. Sarah arrived with her 2 kids, 8 and 10, who ate quickly and then sat quietly doing homework at the corner table while their mother stared at nothing. Marcus served each person the same way. Made eye contact, asked how they were doing, listened to the answer even when the line backed up. He'd learned in the army that feeding people wasn't just about calories, it was about dignity, about looking someone in the eye and treating them like they mattered. Raymond showed up at 7 like always and started washing dishes. He worked methodically, favoring his bad back, never complaining. Marcus paid him $20 a day in cash. Not much, but Raymond saved every penny in a jar he kept hidden somewhere. Had dreams of getting his contractor's license back someday. Tommy wandered in around 8 after everyone else had eaten. He always came late, like he was testing whether there'd still be food left. There always was. Marcus made sure of it. You worried about those guys? Tommy asked, shoving oatmeal into his mouth. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Not particularly. They're serious, man. Dante doesn't make threats he won't follow through on. Marcus poured himself coffee and sat down across from the kid. You know them? Everyone knows them. They've owned this street since before I was born. Tommy kept his eyes on his bowl. My older brother used to run with them. That's how he ended up in prison. You're not your brother. Yeah, well, doesn't matter what I am if Dante decides to burn this place down. Marcus sipped his coffee. It was bitter and strong, the way he liked it. Let me worry about that. But Tommy had a point. Over the next 3 days, the pressure increased. On Saturday, someone smashed the headlights on Marcus's truck, a beat-up Ford he'd bought for $800. On Sunday, the warehouse's power got cut off for 6 hours. The utility company claimed it was routine maintenance, but the timing felt deliberate. On Monday, a health inspector showed up unannounced, spent 2 hours examining every corner of the kitchen with a clipboard and a suspicious expression. Marcus passed the inspection, barely. The inspector cited him for a loose floor tile and gave him 2 weeks to fix it. As the man left, Marcus saw him talking to Leon on the corner. Money changed hands. That afternoon, Marcus called a meeting. He asked everyone who regularly ate at the soup kitchen to stay after lunch. 58 people gathered around the tables. 7 were out doing day labor or had other obligations, but word would spread. Marcus stood near the serving counter, uncomfortable being the center of attention. You all know there's been some trouble. Dante Riggs wants me to pay protection money. I can't afford it. If I pay him, I can't afford food. So we've got a situation. We should call the cops, Sarah said. Her kids pressed against her sides. Martin laughed, bitter and sharp. Cops don't come here unless someone's already dead. Even then, they take their time. What if we pool money? Dorothy suggested. We could all chip in. Marcus shook his head. You don't have money. That's why you're here. And even if we paid once, it wouldn't stop. He'd just keep demanding more. So what do we do? Raymond asked from the back. Marcus looked at the faces staring back at him. People society had written off. Invisible people who lived in the cracks, who survived on scraps and determination. But there was something else there, too. Something he'd seen in soldiers who'd been pushed too far and decided they wouldn't move another inch. I'm not closing down, Marcus said. This is your place as much as mine. But I need you to understand what that might mean. Things could get dangerous. Tommy stood up. I grew up on these streets. I know how Dante operates. He's going to escalate until you break. Then I won't break. You think you can fight the Bleecker Street boys by yourself? Marcus met the kid's eyes. I'm not by myself. The room went quiet. 65 people who'd been broken by life, who'd lost everything, who had nothing except the community they'd found inside this warehouse. Something shifted in that silence, a decision being made without words. Dorothy spoke first. I was a nurse for 30 years. I know how to treat injuries. I can fix things, Raymond said. Electrical, plumbing, basic carpentry. I still got tools. Martin cleared his throat. I used to handle security systems before everything. I remember some things. One by one, they offered what they had. Tommy knew every alley and escape route in 6 blocks. Sarah could organize supplies. She'd managed a grocery store before her husband left and her life fell apart. An older man named Frank, who rarely spoke, mentioned he'd been a cop 20 years ago before alcohol destroyed his career. A woman named Rita said she still had friends who worked at the courthouse and could get copies of public records. Marcus listened, something tight in his chest, loosening slightly. He'd spent so long thinking of himself as the one doing the helping, he'd forgotten that everyone had something to give if you just asked. "All right," he said. "Here's what we're going to do. We keep operating normal. We don't provoke, but we don't back down either. And we watch out for each other." Frank, the ex-cop, raised his hand. "You need to understand something. Dante's connected. He's got city council members in his pocket, cops who look the other way, judges who owe him favors. You can't beat him by fighting fair. I don't plan to fight at all if I can avoid it. You can't avoid it. He's already decided you're gone." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we'll deal with it when it comes." The meeting broke up. People drifted away in small groups, talking quietly. Marcus started cleaning up, scraping plates, loading the industrial dishwasher. Raymond worked beside him in companionable silence. "You know this is crazy, right?" Raymond said eventually. "Probably. We're a bunch of broken-down people trying to stand up to an actual criminal organization." "Yep. We're going to lose." Marcus loaded another plate. "Maybe. But I spent 20 years watching soldiers face impossible odds. You know what I learned? It's not about winning. It's about deciding some things are worth standing up for, even when you know you might get knocked down." Raymond dried a serving spoon, examining it like it held answers. "I used to be somebody. Had a business, employees, a house with a mortgage. Then my back went out, and the pills made everything else disappear. I've spent 5 years being invisible." He set the spoon down carefully. "It'd be nice to matter again, even if it's just for a little while." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. They finished the dishes as sunlight angled through the high windows, turning the steam into golden haze. Outside, Dante sat in his BMW 3 blocks away, watching the warehouse through tinted windows. Leon stood beside the car, arms crossed. "They're not going to pay," Leon said. "No," Dante agreed. "They're not. So what do we do?" Dante drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. This should have been simple. One old man running a charity kitchen. But something about the situation bothered him. The way all those people had gathered around Marcus. The way they'd looked at him, not with fear, but with something that felt dangerously close to loyalty. "We remind them who runs this street," Dante said. "Tomorrow night, after the kitchen closes. We make it clear this isn't a negotiation anymore." Leon nodded and walked away. Dante sat alone in his car, staring at the warehouse, feeling like he'd just made a decision he couldn't take back. Inside the soup kitchen, Marcus locked the doors and turned off the lights. He stood in the darkness for a moment, listening to the building settle, thinking about the people who'd offered to help protect something that barely existed. Just hot meals and dignity and the fragile belief that they deserved both. He thought about angels. Real ones, not the kind from Christmas cards. The kind that showed up when you needed them most, wearing worn-out shoes and carrying nothing but stubborn hope. The kind that didn't back down. Tuesday morning started like any other. Marcus opened the doors at 6 sharp, and the familiar faces filed in. But there was electricity in the air, a tension that made conversations quieter and glances sharper. Everyone knew something was coming. Dorothy sat at her usual table, but her mystery novel remained closed beside her untouched coffee. Tommy positioned himself near the window where he could watch the street. Frank, the former cop, had walked the perimeter before breakfast, checking sightlines and exits like he was doing a security assessment. Marcus served breakfast and tried to maintain normalcy. Pancakes today, made from a bulk mix donated by a restaurant supply store that was going out of business. The syrup was generic brand, watered down to stretch further, but nobody complained. Hot food was hot food. Around 9, after most people had eaten, Rita came in carrying a folder stuffed with papers. She'd been to the courthouse like she promised. She spread the documents across a table while Marcus, Frank, Martin, and Raymond gathered around. Dante Riggs, Rita said, tapping the first page. Real name Dante Marcus Riggs, 29 years old. Arrested 6 times, assault, drug possession, weapons charges. Never convicted. Witnesses disappeared or changed their stories. She pulled out another sheet. His crew operates through a front company called Bleecker Holdings, LLC. They own 2 buildings on this street and lease 3 others. Frank studied the papers with the focus of someone remembering skills he'd tried to forget. A Bleecker Holdings. That's how they're laundering money. Small businesses pay rent to the LLC, which pays Dante, and suddenly drug money looks like legitimate real estate income. There's more, Rita continued. The warehouse we're in, still technically owned by the Meredith estate. The probate case has been stalled for 2 years because there's a dispute about back taxes. But last week, someone filed papers trying to force a sale. Guess who the prospective buyer is? Bleecker Holdings, Marcus said. Exactly. If they get this building, they can demolish it and sell the lot to developers for 6 times what they paid. Your soup kitchen isn't just in Dante's way. It's standing on his retirement plan. The implications settled over the group like cold water. This wasn't just about protection money anymore. Dante needed them gone, and he had the legal machinery to make it happen eventually. How long do we have? Marcus asked. Rita flipped through more papers. The judge scheduled a hearing for 3 weeks from now. If the estate can't prove they're paying taxes and maintaining the property, the court will force a sale. Dante's lawyers will be the only bidders. Raymond leaned back, pressing his hand against his lower spine. So we're getting evicted legally, and if we don't leave, Dante will do it illegally. Either way, we're finished. Not necessarily, Martin said. He'd been quiet, but now his accountant brain was working through possibilities. The estate can't pay the back taxes because they're tied up in probate. But what if someone else paid them? What if the estate accepted a new tenant who maintained the property and paid market rent? We can't afford market rent, Marcus said. No, but we could form a non-profit. Officially incorporate the soup kitchen as a charitable organization. Non-profits get tax breaks, grant eligibility, protection under charitable use laws. If we had proper non-profit status, the estate might prefer us over Dante. We're less legally complicated, and we make them look good. Frank rubbed his jaw, thinking. That's smart, but non-profits need board members, bylaws, documentation. That takes time. We have 3 weeks. We also have another problem, Tommy interrupted from the window. Dante said 2 weeks before he'd force the issue. We're on day 5. He's not going to wait around while we file paperwork. He was right. The legal solution might work long-term, but they still had to survive the short-term. And based on Dante's pattern, violence was coming soon. Marcus looked around the warehouse. The space was large, maybe 5,000 square feet. High ceilings with exposed beams. The loading dock in back. 2 exits, multiple windows. Concrete floors and metal walls. During his army years, Marcus had learned to assess tactical situations. This building could be defended if necessary, but defense meant confrontation, and confrontation meant people getting hurt. We need a night watch, Frank said, following Marcus's thoughts. Dante's going to hit us when the kitchen's closed, probably try to burn us out or vandalize the place so badly we can't operate. I'll take first watch, Tommy offered immediately. You'll take shifts with others, Marcus corrected. Nobody stays alone. Groups of 3 rotating every 4 hours. We watch, but we don't engage. If Dante shows up with his crew, we call the police and document everything, Frank snorted. Police won't come in time to matter. Then we document it and use it in court. Rita, can we file harassment complaints? We can file anything we want. Whether anyone cares is different. The planning continued through the morning. Martin started drafting non-profit paperwork using the public library computers since he didn't have internet access. Rita coordinated with her courthouse contacts to get copies of every relevant document. Dorothy organized a medical supply kit, bandages, antiseptic, pain medication, just in case. Sarah created a phone tree so everyone could communicate quickly if trouble started. By noon, the soup kitchen had transformed into something resembling a command center. People who'd been drifting through life suddenly had purpose, assignments, roles to play. Marcus watched it happen with a mixture of pride and worry. These were vulnerable people, many dealing with addiction, mental illness, disabilities. He was asking them to stand up to criminals. Was that leadership or recklessness? Raymond seemed to read his thoughts. "They're not doing this because you asked," he said quietly. "They're doing it because someone finally gave them something worth protecting. Lunch service was busy. Word had spread through the homeless community that something was happening at Marcus's place. People showed up who'd never been there before, curious about the old army cook who was facing down the Bleecker Street boys. Marcus served them all, navy bean soup and cornbread. Same as always. Around 2 in the afternoon, a black sedan pulled up outside. Not Dante's BMW, something newer, more expensive. A woman in a business suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. She walked to the door and knocked professionally. Marcus answered. The woman was maybe 40, dark hair pulled back, eyes that missed nothing. "Marcus Webb." "That's me. My name is Jennifer Cross. I'm an attorney with the city's legal aid office. I heard you might need some help." Marcus stepped aside, letting her enter. "Who told you that?" "Let's just say you have friends you don't know about." Jennifer looked around the warehouse, taking in the folding tables, the industrial kitchen, the people who'd stopped eating to watch this new development. "I understand you're facing pressure from Dante Riggs." That's one way to put it. "I've been trying to build a case against him for 3 years. He's careful, insulated, always stays one step away from anything that could stick in court. But if you're willing to file official complaints, document harassment, create a paper trail, that gives me ammunition." Frank approached, his old cop instincts sizing up the lawyer. "Why would legal aid care about a soup kitchen?" Jennifer met his gaze steadily. "Because Dante Riggs has been squeezing this neighborhood for a decade, and nobody's had the guts to push back. You want to know why? Because he targets the vulnerable. People who can't afford lawyers, who are afraid to talk to police, who the system has already failed. But if you stand up to him, if you fight back legally and publicly, it exposes him. It shows he's not untouchable." "You want to use us," Marcus said. "Not angry, just stating fact. I want to help you. And yes, I want to use this situation to finally bring Dante down. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out documents. "I can file injunctions, restraining orders, harassment complaints. I can represent you at the probate hearing. I can make enough legal noise that Dante can't just make you disappear quietly. But I need you to be willing to go on record. That means visibility. That means risk." The room had gone silent. Everyone understood what Jennifer was offering, a real chance to fight back through the system. But it also meant painting a bigger target on themselves. Marcus looked at the faces of his 65 angels. Dorothy nodded slightly. Raymond stood straighter despite his bad back. Tommy's jaw was set with determination. Sarah held her children close, but didn't look away. Frank's expression was grim but steady. "What do we need to do?" Marcus asked. Jennifer smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. "First, we document everything. Every threat, every instance of vandalism, every interaction with Dante or his crew. Photos, written statements, anything you've got. Second, we file a formal complaint with the police. Third, we get your non-profit status moving so you have legal standing as an organization. And fourth," she paused, "we prepare for him to escalate. Because once he knows you've got legal representation, he's going to panic. He's already planning to hit us," Tommy said. "Tonight or tomorrow night?" "We heard," Jennifer's expression hardened. "Then we make sure there are witnesses. I'll have private investigators watching this building starting this evening. If Dante makes a move, we'll have documentation that will hold up in court." She spent the next 2 hours collecting statements, photographing the damage that had already been done, creating an official record. Martin worked with her on the non-profit paperwork. Rita provided all the documents she'd gathered. By the time Jennifer left at 5, the soup kitchen had transformed from a charity operation into a legal case. Marcus served dinner, chili and rice, and watched the sun set through the high windows. The night watch would start at 8. Tommy, Frank and Raymond would take the first shift. They'd positioned themselves strategically, covering all sightlines to the building. Dorothy approached as Marcus was cleaning up. "You know this might not work, right? We might do everything right and still lose." "I know, but you're doing it anyway." Marcus looked at her. "I've got nowhere else to be. This is what matters." She patted his arm and returned to her book. Outside, darkness settled over Bleecker Street. Somewhere out there, Dante Riggs was making his own plans. The collision was inevitable now. Both sides had committed. Neither could back down without losing everything. Marcus finished cleaning, locked the front door, and joined the night watch. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, 65 angels were standing guard. And that had to count for something. The attack came on Wednesday night, exactly when Tommy predicted it would. Marcus had just finished the midnight shift rotation. The building was quiet, except for the hum of the industrial refrigerator and the occasional creak of metal settling in the cool air. Frank and 2 others, a Vietnam vet named Carl and a younger guy named Deshawn, were stationed at different points around the warehouse, watching through windows. At 1:40 in the morning, Carl spotted movement. 3 figures approaching from the south, staying in the shadows between streetlights. He clicked the small walkie-talkie they'd bought from a pawn shop. "We've got company." "South side." Marcus moved to the window. He could make out shapes, but not faces. One of them was carrying something, a gas can, probably. The plan was obvious. Torch the building, destroy the kitchen, end this whole situation before the legal proceedings could gain momentum. Frank appeared beside Marcus, his phone already out. "I'm calling 911. They won't get here in time, I know, but we need the call on record." Frank dialed, reported a crime in progress, gave the address. The dispatcher promised units were on the way. Frank and Marcus both knew that meant 15 minutes minimum, probably longer. Bleecker Street wasn't a priority neighborhood. The 3 figures reached the loading dock. One of them, Leon, Marcus recognized his size, tried the door. It was reinforced and locked. They moved along the building toward the side entrance, where Marcus usually came in each morning. "What do we do?" Carl asked, tension making his voice tight. Marcus thought fast. Jennifer's private investigators were parked a block away in an unmarked van, recording everything. That meant they needed the attempted arson on camera, needed clear evidence. But they also couldn't let the building actually burn. "Wait until they breach," Marcus said. "Then we turn on every light in the building and make noise. Lots of noise. We want them knowing there are people inside, and we want the cameras catching their faces." Deshawn was already by the breaker box. Carl and Frank positioned themselves near anything that could make sound. Pots, metal serving trays, anything that would clang. Marcus grabbed the air horn he'd bought specifically for emergencies. They watched through the window as Jamal worked on the side door lock with a crowbar. It took him 3 minutes, but the old mechanism finally gave. The door swung open. Leon and the 3rd guy, Marcus didn't recognize him, stepped inside first, Leon carrying the gas can. "Now," Marcus said, Deshawn through every breaker. The warehouse flooded with harsh fluorescent light. Marcus hit the air horn, a sound like a ship warning of collision, loud enough to wake everyone within 3 blocks. Frank started banging metal serving trays together. Carl shouted at the top of his lungs. The effect was immediate and chaotic. Leon dropped the gas can, gasoline splashing across the concrete floor. Jamal spun toward the noise, pulling a gun from his waistband. The 3rd guy bolted back toward the door, but they weren't alone. From the shadows inside the warehouse, more people emerged. Tommy and Raymond from behind the serving counter. Sarah and Rita from the storage area. Dorothy standing calmly near her usual table. 20 people total, spread throughout the space, all of them having hidden when the break-in started. They didn't have weapons, didn't need them. They just stood there, witnesses to what was happening, their presence transforming a simple arson into something much more complicated. Leon's eyes went wide. What the? Police are already on the way, Frank called out, his old cop voice carrying authority. You've got maybe 10 minutes before this place is surrounded. Jamal's gun swung between targets, his young face showing panic. We should shoot them. Shoot them and finish this. Shut up, Leon snapped. He was smarter than that. Arson was one thing. Murder was different. Murder got investigated properly. Murder made the news. And there were too many witnesses, too many people who could identify them. We're leaving, Dante said. Dante isn't here. We're leaving. Leon grabbed Jamal's arm and pulled him toward the door. The third guy was already gone, running into the night. They followed, leaving the gas can and the crowbar behind. Marcus immediately moved to the spilled gasoline. We need to clean this up before the cops get here. Carl, get every absorbent thing we have, rags, paper towels, cat litter if there's any left. They worked fast. The gasoline had pooled near the door but hadn't spread far. Within 5 minutes, they'd soaked up most of it, opened windows for ventilation, contained the evidence. The crowbar stayed where it fell. The gas can stayed exactly where Leon dropped it. Sirens finally approached at 1:58, 18 minutes after Frank's call. 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing. 4 officers emerged, hands near their weapons, expecting a dangerous situation. Marcus met them at the door, hands visible, posture non-threatening. Thank you for coming. 3 men just broke in and attempted to set fire to this building. We have witnesses and evidence. The lead officer, a woman in her 40s with sergeant's stripes, looked skeptical. You're telling me someone tried to burn down a soup kitchen? I'm telling you exactly that. We have names, descriptions, and there's a private investigation firm in a van 1 block south that recorded the entire incident. That changed the atmosphere. The sergeant's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. Show me. For the next 2 hours, the police took statements. Jennifer Cross arrived at 2:30, still in her business suit despite the hour. She'd been on call, waiting for something exactly like this. She guided everyone through their statements, made sure the evidence was properly catalogued, ensured the gas can and crowbar were tagged and photographed. The private investigators provided their footage. Clear video of Leon, Jamal, and the third man approaching the building, breaking in, carrying accelerant. The quality was good enough to identify faces. Good enough for charges. By 4 in the morning, the police had left with promises to follow up. Jennifer stayed, helping Marcus document everything for the legal file. The warehouse smelled like gasoline and stress, but it was still standing, still operational. This is good, Jennifer said, packing up her briefcase. Attempted arson with clear video evidence and multiple witnesses. The DA will have to take this seriously. Will they arrest Dante? Raymond asked. Not yet. Leon and Jamal probably. But connecting this directly to Dante is harder. He's careful to keep his hands clean. However, she smiled slightly, this gives us leverage. Dante's crew just committed a felony. If we can get either of them to flip, to testify that Dante ordered it, then we've got him. Marcus walked her to her car as dawn started breaking over the city. You think they'll testify? Jamal might. He's young, stupid, looking serious time. If we offer him a deal, he might take it rather than go down for Dante. She paused at her car door. You understand this makes you more of a target, not less. Dante's going to be furious. I know. Your people, these 65 you've been feeding, they stood up tonight. That's remarkable. But can they keep standing when the pressure gets worse? Marcus looked back at the warehouse. Through the windows, he could see people cleaning up, checking on each other, making coffee even though it was barely dawn. Dorothy was reading her mystery novel. Tommy was helping Sarah calm her kids, who'd been scared by the air horn. Raymond was already patching the door lock that Jamal had broken. They're tougher than they look, Marcus said. Jennifer studied him for a moment. You know what I think? I think you didn't just feed these people. You reminded them they were worth something. That's dangerous, Marcus. People who remember their worth don't stay invisible anymore. She drove away into the grey morning light. Marcus returned to the warehouse, where someone had started breakfast, even though they were 2 hours early. The routine continued, because the routine mattered. Because showing up and serving food and treating people with dignity was the whole point. The day shift started arriving at 6. News had spread through the neighborhood grapevine about what happened. More people showed up than usual. Some out of curiosity, some offering support, some just wanting to see the place that had stood up to Dante Riggs and survived. Marcus served them all. Scrambled eggs and toast, coffee that could strip paint. He moved through the familiar motions, exhausted but steady. Around 8 his phone buzzed. "Unknown number," he answered. "This is Marcus. You made a mistake last night." Dante's voice cold and controlled. "I tried to handle this quietly. Give you a chance to walk away with your dignity. But you involved lawyers and cops. You made this public. So now I'm going to destroy you publicly. You're welcome to try. You don't understand what you're dealing with. I own this neighborhood. I own the politicians, the police, the judges. You've got some homeless people and a legal aid lawyer. You think that's enough?" Marcus leaned against the counter, watching his 65 angels eating breakfast, talking quietly, living despite everything the world had thrown at them. "I think people underestimate what's possible when folks decide they're not going to be pushed around anymore." Dante laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Enjoy your next few days, old man. They're going to be your last in that building. I promise you that." The line went dead. Marcus set his phone down and went back to serving breakfast. The threat was clear. The danger was real. But looking around the warehouse, seeing people who'd found something worth defending, Marcus felt oddly calm. He'd spent 20 years in the army preparing for battles. This one was different, fought with legal papers instead of weapons, with community instead of soldiers. But the principle was the same. Some things were worth the fight. Some ground couldn't be surrendered. Outside, Bleecker Street was waking up. The city moved on, indifferent to the small war brewing in a forgotten warehouse. But inside those metal walls, something had changed. The angels weren't invisible anymore, and that changed everything. The arrests came faster than anyone expected. Thursday afternoon, Leon was picked up outside the check-cashing place. By evening, Jamal was in custody. The video evidence was too clear, the witness statements too consistent. The district attorney's office, suddenly interested now that the media had picked up the story, filed charges, attempted arson, breaking and entering, conspiracy to commit a felony. Local news ran the story that night. "Soup Kitchen defended by homeless community," read the headline. They interviewed Dorothy, who spoke eloquently about dignity and second chances. They got footage of Marcus serving lunch, the line of people waiting patiently for food. The reporter portrayed it as a David and Goliath story, vulnerable people standing up to neighborhood crime. By Friday morning, the warehouse had visitors. A church group donated $500 and 3 boxes of canned goods. A local restaurant offered to provide bread daily instead of twice weekly. The mayor's office sent a representative who took photos and made vague promises about community support. Marcus accepted it all with quiet gratitude, but his attention was elsewhere. Dante hadn't been arrested. Jamal was in jail refusing to talk, and Leon had made bail within 6 hours. The legal system was grinding forward, but Dante remained untouchable, and everyone knew he was planning something. Jennifer called Friday afternoon with news. The probate hearing got moved up. Monday morning, 9 a.m. The judge wants to resolve this quickly, given the publicity. "I've filed papers establishing your non-profit status. It's not official yet, but it shows intent. The estate lawyer is willing to negotiate with you instead of Dante, especially now that Bleecker Holdings is connected to criminal activity." What does that mean? It means if we can show the judge that you're a legitimate charitable operation with community support and the ability to maintain the property, you might win. But Dante's lawyers are good. They'll argue that you're unstable, that the violence proves the area isn't suitable for a non-profit, that their client is a legitimate businessman being unfairly targeted. Monday's 3 days away. I know. Can you hold on that long? Marcus looked around the warehouse. Raymond was repairing a window frame. Sarah was organizing the food pantry with Rita's help. Tommy was teaching Carl how to change the oil in Marcus's truck. We'll hold, but Friday night was tense. Everyone felt it. The night watch doubled. 6 people instead of 3 spread around the building in pairs. The private investigators were still there, cameras rolling. Police had increased patrols, but that meant driving past every few hours, not actual protection. At 10:30, Tommy spotted a car circling the block. Not Dante's BMW, a nondescript sedan with tinted windows. It passed 3 times, slowing each time it approached the warehouse. On the 4th pass, it stopped. 4 men got out. Not Leon nor Jamal. New guys, professionals by the look of them. They didn't approach the building. Instead, they spread out, taking positions at corners, watching the streets. One of them lit a cigarette and leaned against a light post, settling in. "They're setting up surveillance," Frank said, watching through binoculars. "Dante's watching us, figuring out our patterns. For what? For when he makes his real move." The men stayed until 2 in the morning, then drove away. No threats, no confrontation, just presence. A message that Dante was still there, still planning, still in control. Saturday brought more donations from people who'd seen the news coverage. An elderly couple dropped off $200 in cash, saying they'd been homeless once and someone had helped them. A construction company offered to repair the loading dock for free. A lawyer who wasn't Jennifer called and offered pro bono assistance with the non-profit paperwork. The community was rallying, but Marcus could feel time running out. Monday's hearing would decide the building's future, and Dante, increasingly desperate as his legal position weakened, was going to make one more play before then. It happened Sunday morning. Marcus arrived at 5:30 to start breakfast prep. The street was quiet, empty in that pre-dawn way that made everything feel suspended. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, flipped the light switches. Nothing happened. No lights. He tried again. Dead. Marcus pulled out his phone for illumination, and that's when he smelled it. Not gasoline this time. Something else. Something chemical and sharp that made his eyes water. He backed out immediately, pulling the door closed. His heart hammered. Someone had been inside, done something to the electrical system, maybe pumped something toxic into the ventilation. If he'd gone further in, if he'd started the stoves with gas flowing, Marcus called 911, then Jennifer, then Frank. Within 20 minutes, the area was swarming with emergency vehicles. Fire department, hazmat team, police. They evacuated the surrounding buildings as a precaution, while technicians in protective gear entered the warehouse. By 8 a.m., the news crews had arrived. By 9, the story was spreading online. Someone had sabotaged a soup kitchen, putting dozens of lives at risk. The public outrage was immediate and fierce. The hazmat team found chemical accelerant sprayed throughout the kitchen, concentrated near the gas lines. The electrical panel had been rewired so that any spark would ignite the fumes. It was sophisticated, deadly, and if Marcus had followed his normal routine without noticing, the resulting explosion would have destroyed the building and everyone inside. Jennifer stood beside Marcus on the street, watching firefighters ventilate the building. Dante went too far this time. This isn't intimidation. This is attempted mass murder. The DE will have to act. He'll deny involvement, probably. But the private investigators caught someone entering the building at 3 a.m. We've got footage. Marcus turned to her. Who? We don't have a clear face, but the build and movement match Dante himself. He didn't trust anyone else with this. Did it personally. Jennifer's expression was grim. He's going down, Marcus. This crosses a line even his political connections can't protect him from. By noon, Dante Riggs was in custody. The video evidence, combined with the forensic work inside the warehouse, gave investigators enough for an arrest warrant. Charges included attempted murder, arson, conspiracy, domestic terrorism. The DA held a press conference, calling it an attack not just on a building, but on the most vulnerable members of our community. Monday's probate hearing became almost ceremonial. With Bleecker Holdings' principal owner under arrest for terrorism charges, their bid for the property collapsed. The estate lawyer, eager to distance the family from the scandal, accepted Marcus's non-profit proposal. The judge approved it conditional on final paperwork, giving the soup kitchen a 5-year lease with option to purchase. Marcus stood outside the courthouse afterward, surrounded by his 65 angels who'd shown up for the hearing. Media cameras captured Dorothy hugging him, Raymond shaking his hand, Sarah's kids waving hand-drawn signs that said, "Thank you, Marcus." But Marcus's thoughts were elsewhere. The warehouse needed deep cleaning before they could reopen. The community needed feeding in the meantime. There was work to do. Jennifer approached with a final update. Jamal agreed to testify. With his cooperation and the evidence against Dante, the prosecution is confident. Dante's looking at 20 years minimum, and the others, Leon and the rest of them, scattered. Without Dante holding the organization together, the Bleecker Street Boys are finished. Some will face charges, others will just fade away. She paused. You won, Marcus. Against impossible odds, you actually won. Marcus looked at the people gathered around him. Not victims anymore, not invisible. They'd stood up when it mattered, reminded the world they existed, that they deserved dignity and protection, and a place to eat a hot meal without fear. We won, he corrected. None of this was me. The warehouse reopened Wednesday morning, after 3 days of cleaning and repairs. Marcus fired up the stoves at 6 a.m., same as always. The line formed outside, Dorothy first, then Martin, then Raymond and Sarah and Tommy and all the others. 65 people who'd fought for something worth keeping. Marcus served oatmeal and coffee, made eye contact, asked how people were doing. The routine continued because the routine mattered. Because showing up every day and treating people with dignity was still the whole point. Over the following weeks, the story faded from the news. Other crises took its place. Other headlines demanded attention. But in the warehouse on Bleecker Street, something permanent had changed. The soup kitchen became a model that other cities studied. Donations increased. Volunteers appeared. The non-profit grew carefully, never losing sight of its original purpose. Dante Riggs went to trial 8 months later, convicted on all counts. Sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Bleecker Street slowly transformed as legitimate businesses moved in. But the warehouse remained, protected now by law and community support. Marcus kept cooking. Every morning at 6, every day without fail, serving anyone who walked through those doors. The 65 angels became 70, then 80, then more. The numbers changed, but the mission didn't. People asked Marcus sometimes how he'd found the courage to stand up to Dante. He always gave the same answer. He hadn't done anything special. He just kept showing up, kept serving meals, kept treating people like they mattered. The courage belonged to the people who'd stood beside him, broken people who'd discovered they weren't broken after all, just waiting for something worth fighting for. On the 1-year anniversary of the night they'd defended the warehouse from arson, Dorothy organized a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just cake from a donated mix and coffee in paper cups. Someone made a speech thanking Marcus for everything he'd done. Marcus deflected as always, turning the attention back to the community. But later, cleaning up alone, he paused and looked around the warehouse. Sunlight streamed through the high windows. The industrial stoves hummed. The folding tables sat ready for tomorrow's breakfast. He thought about angels, not the celestial kind from paintings, but the real ones, people who showed up when you needed them, who stood their ground when it would have been easier to walk away, who proved that even the most vulnerable people possessed strength when they decided something was worth protecting. 65 angels had eaten at his soup kitchen that first threatened day. 65 angels who taught Marcus that feeding people wasn't just about food. It was about reminding them they mattered, that they deserved dignity, that they were worth fighting for. He locked up for the night and headed home, already thinking about tomorrow's menu. The work continued. The mission remained. And somewhere in the city, people who'd once been invisible were walking with their heads a little higher, remembering the day they'd stood up and refused to disappear. That was enough. That was everything. Up next, you got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.